Hello, Bond fans! So, as a lot of you are probably aware, I've been remaking some of my original video reviews these past few years, and I've had a lot of comments asking me to, well, not take down the old videos, and why I'm even taking them down at all, and stuff like that, so I thought I'd address it here. Basically, these old videos were the very first things I made for this channel when I started making videos for YouTube way back in, 2010. I had a very poor video quality, DV recorder. The only editing software I had was Windows Movie Maker, and I was more wooden in front of the camera than George Lazenby. So for people who were new to my channel and wanted to start at the beginning of my review series and work their way through, I wasn't exactly thrilled at the idea that the first bit of video they'd see if they started Dr. No would be, well... Hello everyone, and welcome to my first weekly Bond. Please don't hold that title against me, I can't do any better, I'm rubbish with titles. Yeah, that. But I feel like enough time has passed and enough people are curious enough that I've decided to start putting these old reviews back up here for those who are morbidly curious, and you'd have to be morbid, to see how this channel and the content on it has evolved over the years. These are by no means my preferred versions of these reviews, which you can find using these links, but for those who may want to compare and contrast and see how a channel can, well, change over time, I hope that they might be of some interest. So, without further ado, here we go with the very start of My Weekly Bond 2010. So hello everyone, I should probably explain what the hell this is. Basically, I've been a huge James Bond fan my entire life, and recently when I was cleaning out my room I realised just how much James Bond crap I've actually accumulated over the years. I have all the films on video, I have selected soundtracks, I have a load of the books including a first edition of From Russia With Love, I've got trading cards, playing cards, magazines, every single issue of the Spy Files magazine, video games, pens, a shitload of the 40th anniversary model cars. I've got all the films on Special Edition DVD and Ultimate Edition DVD, and a few of them on Blu-ray disc now. I even got some of the Special Edition DVDs signed by the director Guy Hamilton. I even came sixth in the Win Aston Martin competition that they used to promote the Ultimate Edition DVDs a few years ago. That's how big a fan I am. I love James Bond. And yet I haven't actually watched the original films in about 4 or 5 years. So basically I thought I'd make my way through all 22 films again and post video, blog, review things as I go. I'd also like to point out that these video blog review things are purely opinion based. So you're going to hear an awful lot of Timothy Dalton bashing when we get into his films in the series. And that's not to say I think he's a bad actor. On the contrary, I think as long as he's playing a supermarket manager, a Time Lord, or a theatrical hedgehog, he's perfectly fine. I just think he makes for a shit James Bond. And that's probably because I tend to prefer my Bond films to be silly and campy and fun, as opposed to really downbeat and serious. But no doubt I'll get onto that later. So, with that in mind, I shall begin my weekly bond, cheesy name I know, with Dr. No. Hello everyone, and welcome to my first weekly bond. Please don't hold that title against me, I can't do any better, I'm rubbish with titles. I'm also aware that that isn't the poster for Dr. No, but it's the only Sean Connery James Bond film poster I have, so I thought, you know, I'll just stick that up. That way the background won't look so bland. Oh, give me a break. Anyway, Dr. No. The film begins with a series of bizarre electronic beeping noises before we are introduced to the classic gun barrel opening which would become a standard trademark of the series. After a jazzy title sequence, the film proper begins and we see British intelligence agent Strangways and his secretary murdered by a trio of assassins known as the Three Blind Mice. The film then moves to England, where we are introduced to our hero James Bond 007, played here by Sean Connery. This scene immediately sets the style of Bond's world, glamorous and sophisticated. Bond introduces himself with his trademark
Bond. James Bond.
And flirts while playing chemin de fer with a beautiful woman, Sylvia Trench, played by Eunice Gayson.
Looks like you're out to get me.
It's an idea at that.
According to Eunice Gayson, who plays Sylvia Trench, director Terence Young originally envisioned the character to appear in the first 6 James Bond films. In the first 5, Bond would be cavorting with her at the beginning of the film, and then eventually in the 6th film she would become the main girl and be present all the film. Obviously this didn't happen. Bond is called away from his cavorting to the MI6 headquarters where he is briefed by his chief M, played by Bernard Lee. M in this film is gruff and to the point. Bernard Lee plays him perfectly. It's also a testament to the character that although Bond does not fear his exotic enemies, a simple glance of disapproval from M can reduce him to a chastised schoolboy. We are also introduced to the character of Major Boothroyd in this film, though here the character is played by Peter Burton. Major Boothroyd in future entries would be known as Q, be played by Desmond Llewellyn, and supply Bond with a lot of exotic and wildly elaborate gadgets. However, in this film he simply provides Bond with his new Walther PPK. Bond would use the Walther PPK right up until Tomorrow Never Dies. It is at MI6 that we are introduced to Moneypenny, played here by Lois Maxwell. The Bond-Moneypenny relationship is established perfectly in one short scene.
You never take me to dinner looking like this, James. You never take me to dinner, period.
I would, you know. Only M would have me court-martialed for illegal use of government property.
Flattery'll get you nowhere, but don't stop trying. Now.
I'll talk more about Lois Maxwell as Moneypenny in other entries, as she is in the first 14 films. It's also worth mentioning that this is the first film to feature the James Bond hat toss. Bond is then sent to Jamaica to investigate the disappearance of Strangways, but not before he has a bit of sex with Sylvia Trench, who somehow manages to sneak into Bond's apartment and seduce him, thus being the first woman of the series that Bond shags. Bond arrives in Jamaica, and we get a lot of shots of suspicious-looking people, including Bond's chauffeur, who turns out to be a double agent and who Bond has his first real fight of the series with. It's only a small fight, but it already showcases some of the great stunt work from Bob Simmons. Bond also has his first vodka martini 23 minutes in, however it is mixed and not stirred. While interviewing some of Strangway's friends, Bond learns of island fisherman Quarrel, played by John Kitzmiller, and goes to interview him.
Your name, Quarrel?
Maybe.
I'm a friend of Commander Strangways.
No, ain't that nice. I like people whose friends are people.
Quarrel is hostile at first, and the pair even get into a fight before we're introduced to Felix Leiter, played here by Jack Lord, who explains that the two are on the same side and that Quarrel is aiding him. Quite why everyone feels the need to be so mysterious is questionable. Quarrel is definitely one of my favourite of Bond's allies, with great charm and warmth. Even though he's clearly terrified of the supposed dragon on Crab Key, he still agrees to take Bond there. Felix is played young and cool in this film. Felix has never really been a favourite character of mine. I just find him quite boring, especially compared to the more colourful allies Bond has had in future entries, such as Quarrel, Kerim Bane from Russia with Love, Tibbet in A View to a Kill, even Joe Don Baker's character in GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies. Which is a real shame, because Felix Leiter in the book is actually pretty cool. Bond learns from Felix and Quarrel of the mysterious Dr. No, who operates a bauxite mine on the nearby island of Crab Key, close to where Strangways had been collecting mineral samples. Bond does his best Columbo work and goes to investigate Professor Dent, played by Anthony Dawson. Professor Dent is an effective secondary villain, and he gives us someone to boo and hiss at until Dr. No is finally introduced. Dent is nervous about Bond snooping around and heads to Crab Key, where Dr. No gives him a large venomous spider to kill Bond with, because just shooting him would be far too easy. The film has some excellent set design by Ken Adam. Most effective, I feel, is the room where Professor Dent talks to Dr. No. It's a very simple design, but very modern and effective. The whole of Crab Key is really just a showcase of what Ken Adam is capable of. Of course, Bond kills the spider, but only after a very tense scene. It's nice to see an actual look of fear on Bond's face, rather than the nonchalant stance he'd take to these life and death situations in future installments. The next morning, Bond heads to the Governor-General's office to read the official file on Crab Key, only to find that it has been conveniently lost by the Governor's secretary, Miss Tarot. And after catching her listening at the keyhole and suspecting her of being an enemy agent, Bond naturally asks her out on a date. On the way to pick her up, Bond gets himself into a car chase with the three blind mice, who end up driving off a cliff and exploding. For some reason. I can forgive it for not being one of the most exciting car chases in the series, seeing as it is pretty much the series' first real car chase, but it's not the most convincing either. I think it's the terrible back projection more than anything else.
How did it happen?
I think they were on their way to a funeral.
Bond then arrives at Miss Tarot's house and proceeds to seduce her.
I'll just go and put some clothes on.
Don't go to any trouble on my account.
I'm pretty sure that classifies as sexual harassment these days, but then, you know, she's a villain, what the hell. Of course, Bond waits until after he's shagged her before having her arrested.
What's going on?
Forgive me, book her, Superintendent, will you? And, be careful of her nail varnish.
Bond then waits in the house for Professor Dent to arrive, and promptly kills him in cold blood. Bond would never frequently kill in cold blood, however when he does, it is always quite effective and powerful. Later in the night, Bond and Quarrel leave for Crab Key. Lucky for Bond's libido, he wakes the next morning to see Honey Rider, played by Ursula Andress, emerging from the sea in a bikini.
La da da dee da da, when we get married, we make them go. La dee da da da, in a row, underneath the mango tree. La da dee, come watch for the moon. La da da, mango tree, me honey, make hulu look.
So obviously Ursula Andress coming out of the water is one of cinema's most iconic scenes, but I think what I love so much about it is the fact that it's so simple. It's just Ursula Andress coming out of the water, you know, they don't do any fancy editing, music, slow motion bullshit like that. Die another day. You know, it's just very simple but elegant. They don't need to do anything else, because it's Ursula Andress, she's one of the most gorgeous women to ever have lived. Honey Rider really is the ultimate Bond girl. She's intelligent, yet naive. She's resourceful and courageous. Honey Rider really set the standard for the Bond girls that would follow in her footsteps, and very few have come to equal her.
Where's your boat? Fetch my shoes.
Well, that tingled my racistometer. Honey leads Bond and Quarrel inland after her boat is destroyed, despite both her and Quarrel being fearful of the dragon that supposedly inhabits Crab Key.
Those are dragon tracks.
Yes, because dragon tracks are very similar to that of an articulated lorry. The dragon turns out to be a flame-throwing tank. Quarrel is incinerated, and Bond and Honey are captured and decontaminated of radiation before being taken through to a rather lavish suite. I've heard a lot of people talk about how Ursula Andrews is naked during the radiation cleaning scene, and this still clearly proves otherwise. I mean, come on, I can't have been the only one who went through the DVD frame by frame just to see if she was naked. They are then taken to Dr. No's study, where we meet our main villain, an hour and a half into the film. I never was really that big a fan of Dr. No when I first got into the series, but watching it again, he is actually a really cool villain. I don't know if it's because they hold off showing him for like an hour and a half, but he's so creepy and awesome. Dr. No explains to Bond that he is part of a criminal organisation known as Spectre, and plans to disrupt a space launch from Cape Canaveral with his atomic-powered radio beam. The pair exchange a few bitchy remarks.
And unfortunately, I misjudged you. You are just a stupid policeman.
Tell me, does the toppling of American missiles really compensate for having no hands?
Ooh, meow! Before Bond is taken away to a private cell. Bond, of course, escapes the cell by crawling through the air vent. He then disguises himself and finds his way into the base control centre. Bond overloads the nuclear reactor, just as the spacecraft sets off, and thus saving the day. This, however, sets off the alarm, and that really pisses off Dr. No. Bond and Dr. No have a brutal hand-to-hand fight before the Doctor slides to his death by boiling in the reactor's cooling vat. It's certainly nothing on getting blown up, eaten by sharks, or impaled by a nuclear rod. I think what adds to the boringness of Dr. No's death in the film is the fact that his death in the book is fucking insane. He gets buried under a pile of bird shit. I'm not even kidding. At the first brush of the stinking dust column, Dr. No had turned. Bond saw the long arms fling wide as if to embrace the thundering mass. One knee rose to run. The mouth opened and a thin scream came up to Bond above the noise of the engine. Then there was a brief glimpse of a kind of dancing snowman, and then only a mound of yellow bird dung that grew higher and higher. God! Bond's voice gave back an iron echo from the walls of the cabin. He thought of the screaming lungs stuffing with the filthy dust, the body bending and then falling under the weight, the last impotent kick of the heel, the last flash of thought, rage, horror, defeat, and then the silence of the stinking tomb. Now the yellow mountain was 20 feet high. See, why couldn't he have died like that? That's fucking hilarious. I've not actually read Dr. No all the way through, so I have no idea why Dr. No would have a gigantic mound of bird shit on Crab Key, but, you know, I'm sure they could explain it somehow. I look at that, everyone in the reactor room, just as soon as they see James Bond, they all just run away. I mean, there's about 3 dozen people in that room. Why don't, you know, even if just a few of them go up, you know, fight him, bring him down, turn down that dial thing so Crab Key doesn't explode? I mean, you know, makes sense, but they just leave it to Dr. No. No wonder the place fucking blows up. Just proves you can't buy loyalty. After a series of well-thought-out interrogations,
Where's the girl like him in? Where is he?
Bond finds Honey, who is being slowly drowned to death, and the two escape. Originally there were meant to be a load of giant crabs in this scene, and the explanation was that Dr. No was experimenting on Honey to see how much pain she can take. Which would have made a lot more sense than just sort of slowly drowning her to death. Bond and Honey escape Crab Key just as it blows up, and the day is saved. Sir Bond goes on to bag his 3rd girl of the series, and the film ends on what would become the traditional fashion of having Bond alone with the main girl at the end of the film, either getting it on, with it on, or just got it off.
His secret agent code number is 007.
And so that's Dr. No. While I don't think it's one of the best Bond films, it's far from being the worst. I'd place it somewhere in the middle. It's a very entertaining spy action-adventure thriller, and does well in establishing James Bond's glamorous world. Sean Connery makes for an excellent Bond, and I think he's at his best in his first 3 films. He plays the upper-class Bond very well, to say he was previously a rough and tough Scotsman, and had to be groomed for Bond by director Terence Young, who taught Connery how to be sophisticated. So basically, if Connery hadn't been groomed by Terence Young to play James Bond, he'd probably have ended up playing the part as a working-class, rough, unsophisticated fellow. Daniel Craig, then. Not that I have anything but love for Daniel Craig. While initial reviews of Dr. No were mixed, the film was a giant financial success, especially when considering that the film only cost $1 million to produce. It went on to earn $60 million worldwide. This, more than anything else, ensured that the film was definitely going to receive a sequel. And indeed, James Bond will return in From Russia with Love. Before I start this, I'd like to point out once again that I know that this isn't the poster from Russia with Love, but it's the only Connery poster I have, so, you know, gotta have something there. Anyway, From Russia with Love. The film opens, as many Bond films do, with the gun barrel opening. We then see Sean Connery being chased around a mansion garden at night by Quint from Jaws. Red Grant, played by Robert Shaw, who played Quint in Jaws. James Bond's dead? No, he's not dead. He's just a man with a moustache wearing a mask of Sean Connery. And this turns out to be nothing more than a Spectre training exercise. After the credits, we are introduced to Cronston, one of the film's main villains, playing chess. Cronston's assumed to be a creepy villain, but I kind of feeling he's a little bit too creepy. I can't help but cringe whenever I look at him and hear him talk.
Check.
After Cronston is called away from his chess game, we learn that he is a member of Spectre, and he has devised a plan to steal a Lecter cryptographic device from the Soviets, and to sell it back to them, while embarrassing MI6 in the process and getting revenge on James Bond for killing Dr. No in the previous film. Ex-SMERSH operative Rosa Klebb is put in charge of the mission by the cat-stroking, face-shrouded number 1. Klebb chooses Tatiana Romanova, a cipher clerk at the Soviet consulate in Istanbul, to be the Russian pawn in the plan. She does this while creepily flirting with her at the same time.
Take off your jacket. Turn around. You're a fine-looking girl. I have selected you for a most important assignment. Its purpose is to give false information to the enemy.
I know a lot of people love Tanya from Russia with Love, but I just can't help but find her incredibly dull. I don't know if it's the fact that she comes after Honey and before Pussy. Also, she spends quite a lot of the third act just whining.
I know I love you, James. I love you.
Just tell me.
I love you, it's true.
Sure.
Though she's nothing on Stacey Sutton from A View to a Kill.
James, don't leave me! James! Help me! James! James!
Klebb goes to Spectre Island to recruit Red Grant, to assassinate Bond and Tanya once the mission is complete. It's amazing to think that we have our 5 main villains of this film only 10 minutes in, considering it was almost an hour and a half before we actually saw Dr. No. Back in London, Bond is called to M's office.
For my next miracle,
Oh my god, it's Desmond Llewellyn's Q! Oh my god, he's got to catch it! Oh my god, Desmond Llewellyn Q! Oh my god!
It'll be a miracle if he can explain where he's been all day.
So M tells Bond that Romanova has contacted their station in Turkey and has offered to defect with the Lecter device, which MI6 and the CIA have been after for years.
the CIA's been after one of those for years.
Yes, so we.
Tatiana has said that she will only defect to Bond, whose photo she has allegedly found in a Soviet intelligence file. In fact, she is following orders from Klebb, who pretends she is working for SMERSH, and that this is a SMERSH deception. Oh god, I'm already confused. James Bond then receives his first fully fledged gadget of the series, the attaché case. This is the first film to mark an appearance from Desmond Llewellyn, though here he is not credited as Q, but as Boothroyd, as Peter Burton was in the previous film. However, I'll talk about Q in other instalments, seeing as at this stage he's still devoid of any memorable personality traits.
Is that all, sir?
Yes, thanks very much.
Right. Jump.
So Bond flies to Istanbul to meet station head Ali Kerim Bey, though he is followed from the airport by a man in glasses and red Grant. Once again in this film, the Bond theme is used quite a lot, and while I do love the James Bond theme, again, it's used a bit too much. It's punctuating moments that don't need to be punctuated.
Will there be anything else, sir?
No, only this.
Thank you, sir.
I mean, seriously, only tip the hotel porter. Was it a big tip or something? I mean, if you're using the Bond theme for that, why not use it for any mundane event? After Kerim Bey's office is bombed, Bond and Kerim Bey spy on the Soviet consulate using a periscope from an underground tunnel beneath the consulate. Seeing rival agent Krylenko, Kerim Bey takes Bond to a gypsy settlement, where Kerim plans to lie low while deciding how to deal with Krylenko. Okay, why are we being shown this?
The elders of the tribe will then decide who in the end will marry the chief's son.
I mean, it's a well-choreographed fight scene and everything, it's just a bit pointless. I don't really care about these two gypsy women wanting to marry the same man, I care about if James Bond's gonna get that fucking Lecter. Eventually, we get back to the plot, as Krylenko's men attack the gypsy camp. Kerim Bey is wounded by Krylenko, though he gets his revenge the next night. When Bond returns to his hotel suite, he finds Tanya in bed waiting for him. The two engage in some fornicating, unaware that they are being filmed from behind the mirror by Rosa Klebb. Huh, you wouldn't think Klebb was in the amateur porn trade. Bond and Tanya hatch a plan to steal the Lecter, and do just that, before escaping with Kerim on the Orient Express. Because nothing sinister has ever happened on the Orient Express. While aboard the train, Kerim is killed by Red Grant. There's been a murder on the Orient Express? What were the chances of that happening? As with Quarrel in Dr. No, Bond is clearly saddened by his friend's death, which gives Bond the motivation to beat Tanya around a bit.
I don't know what you mean.
Liar.
Well, I guess now's a good time for some moderately interesting trivia. Ian Fleming has a cameo in this film as the man in the white jumper as the Orient Express goes by. The train crosses southern Central Europe to Belgrade, where Bond has arranged to meet Agent Nash from Station Y. However, when the train stops, Quint from Jaws finds and Grant finds and kills Nash and takes his identity.
Nash. Captain Nash.
Bond traveling to Somerset.
My card.
It is at dinner that Bond is tipped off that there is something fishy about Nash.
I have the grilled sole. And for madam. What about you, Nash?
Yes, it sounds very nice. Make that 3 of those, will you?
Oui, monsieur.
I'll have a bottle of the Blanc de Blanc.
Oui, monsieur.
Make mine Chianti.
White Chianti, monsieur.
No, the red kind.
Red wine with fish.
that should have told me something.
Of course. A true Englishman would know you drink white wine with fish. Grant poisons Tanya, and later subdues Bond. Grant does the traditional Bond villain thing and details the whole evil plot, boasting at how Spectre's pitted the Soviets and the British against each other, and how he's going to kill Bond and Tanya and make it look like a murder-suicide over the film that was taken of the two having sex. Q Branch comes through, however, and the attaché case explodes in Grant's face, and after a brutal struggle with the shark... Bond manages to kill Grant. Bond and Tanya leave the train and hijack Grant's getaway car before being attacked by a Spectre helicopter. Gee, this scene reminds me an awful lot of a scene from another movie, I just can't remember which. After successfully ripping off North by Northwest, Bond and Tanya commandeer a powerboat. Meanwhile, back at the Spectre boat, Blofeld is unhappy with how creepy Cronston's plan has failed.
Her people failed.
It was your plan. They followed it implicitly.
Impossible. It was perfect.
Except for one thing. They were dealing with Bond.
Who is Bond compared with Kronsteen?
Guy gives me the creeps. So, Blofeld has Cronston killed with the old poison tip in the shoe gag, and then sends out a fleet of boats to capture Bond. Of course, Bond manages to blow up the fleet that's following him, but only through one of the stupidest bits of judgment from a Bond villain ever.
Slow down! Slow down! Slow down, all boats!
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Everyone slow down right next to these fuel canisters they've just jettisoned. The guy deserves to burn to death. So, with the enemies destroyed, Bond and Tanya make it to Venice, and the film's over. Or is it? Yes, Kleb, disguised as a maid, has one last go at Bond before she's shot by Tanya. And now the film ends, with Bond and Tanya riding away in a gondola, and Bond throwing the sex footage of them both in the water. Kinda surprised he didn't keep it, really, knowing what Bond's like and all.
But oh, you haunted me so.
So that's From Russia With Love, the film that many Bond fans consider to be the greatest Bond film of them all. Am I one of those people? Well, no. But that's not to say From Russia With Love isn't one of the finest Bond films. And indeed a fine film in its own right. One thing I can't fault From Russia With Love on is its great ensemble of villains. For me, the villains are a large part of the reason why I like this film so much. They're all so well acted and most of all memorable. Even though a few of them only have a few minutes of screen time, they're all played brilliantly, with Kleb and Grant being amongst my favourite Bond villains of all time. Also in the film's favour is Pedro Armendariz' wonderfully charismatic and warm portrayal of Kerim Bey, one of the more memorable characters to ever appear in a Bond film. I can't say the same for Tanya, and while Daniela Bianchi plays the part well, the character comes over as a bit bland and uninteresting. The film has some great set pieces, such as the battle at the Gypsy Camp and the fight on the Orient Express, but it still feels a little rough around the edges for me. I can see why many critics and fans consider this to be the best Bond film, and I do really like it. Just on a personal level, there are plenty more Bond films I prefer. So, while I must admit I don't think of From Russia with Love as being the greatest Bond film ever, I still think it stands up pretty well. Like Dr. No, it's a great spy thriller with James Bond relying more on his wits and intelligence rather than gadgets. That's all well and good if you hate gadgets in these films, but I fucking love them. That's why I'll be giving a glowing review to the next James Bond film, Goldfinger. You know something, I'm just gonna come out and say it. I fucking love Goldfinger. It is the perfect Bond film. It has everything you could possibly want from a Bond film. All the ingredients blend together and make a perfect thing. I cannot express how much I fucking love Goldfinger. Ugh. And now that I've declared my love and admiration of this beautiful film, let's have a look at it, shall we? It's probably worth pointing out here that this is the final Sean Connery gun barrel sequence to not actually feature Sean Connery, rather stuntman Bob Simmons, as this is the same gun barrel sequence that was used in both Dr. No and From Russia with Love. They naturally just repeated its usage here. But when the aspect ratio changed in the next Bond film, Thunderball, they had to shoot a different gun barrel sequence, and this time they actually used Sean Connery. We then get a pre-credit sequence, which has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the film, of James Bond infiltrating a Mexican drug lord's den and blowing it up. Bond makes an attempt at some fornicating with one of his girlfriends, before they are rudely interrupted. That's our dashing hero using a woman as a human shield, but she's evil, so who cares? The idea of having a pre-credit sequence which has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the film would become something of a trademark in the Bond films. I personally love it. It's a great excuse to get a bit of action, bit of humour and a few thrills in before the film proper begins.
Shocking. Positively shocking.
This is also the first film in the series directed by Guy Hamilton, who takes over from the previous two films which were directed by Terence Young. After the titles, the main story begins in Florida, with Felix Leiter delivering to Bond a message from M.
Might have known M wouldn't book me into the best hotel in Miami Beach out of pure gratitude.
He asked us to keep an eye on him for you.
Auric Goldfinger. Sounds like a French nail varnish.
He's British, but he doesn't sound like it.
Oh great, Felix is even more boring than he was in Dr. No.
And where do I find him?
Morning, Mr. Simmons. Ready for a little game?
Sure, I'm ready. When you're 10 grand in the hole, you're ready for anything.
Could I have my usual seat?
Oh, you and your suntan.
We're meant to believe that he's English. Christ, he's more German than Schnitzel. Bond gets into Goldfinger's suite and finds Jill Masterson, who Goldfinger's paying to help him cheat at cards. After Bond foils Goldfinger, the two head back to Bond's suite for some fornicating, before Bond realises the champagne has lost its chill.
Oh, it's lost its chill.
Who needs it?
My dear girl, there are some things that just aren't done. Such as drinking Dom Perignon 53 above a temperature of 38 degrees Fahrenheit. That's as bad as listening to the Beatles without earmuffs. Did James Bond just rip into the Beatles? Now, where is this passion juice?
That's for making fun of my favourite band. Bond awakens to see Jill dead in one of the series' most iconic images. Back in London, Bond learns that his true mission is to find out how Goldfinger is smuggling gold internationally. Bond seems pretty pissed off by Masterson's death, which is appropriate as he was the one to get her killed.
This isn't a personal vendetta, 007. It's an assignment like any other.
And here we get the first fully fledged Q branch scene, and it's brilliant.
Morning, Q.
Morning, 007.
Desmond Llewellyn is great, even if he does come off as a bit wooden. Fortunately, you'd get the hang of it a bit later on.
You'll be using this Aston Martin DB5 with modifications.
The DB5, without a doubt, is James Bond's ultimate vehicle. I love how when Pierce Brosnan takes over, we see him still driving the DB5 as his own personal car.
You see the gear lever here? Now, if you take the top off, you'll find a little red button. Whatever you do, don't touch it.
No, why not?
Because you'll release this section of the roof and engage and fire the passenger ejector seat. Whoosh.
Ejector seat? You're joking.
I never joke about my work, 007.
I love how a lot of the actual gadgets were really built into the car, like the oil slick and the ejector seat. Bond arranges to meet Goldfinger socially via a game of golf, in which Bond ups the stakes by betting a large block of gold. We're also introduced to the familiar silhouette from earlier, Goldfinger's manservant, Oddjob.
Oh, you must excuse Oddjob, Mr. Bond. He's an admirable manservant, but mute.
Bond wins the match after discovering Goldfinger was cheating, who then proceeds to threaten Bond.
Many people have tried to involve themselves in my affairs, unsuccessfully.
Bond follows Goldfinger to Switzerland, where he comes across Tilly, a mysterious woman who also seems to be on Goldfinger's tail. So, Bond uses his gadgets to make contact with her.
Look at them!
A double blowout. I've never seen one of these before.
How could new tires?
Yeah, they mention the double blowout, but they don't mention the fucking huge, jagged rip along the side of the car. Surely that'd be the first thing to grab your attention. Later, Bond sneaks into Goldfinger's plant and overhears him talking to Mr. Ling, a red Chinese agent, about Operation Grand Slam. Bond then runs into Tilly, who is revealed to be Jill Masterson's sister, and is out for revenge. An alarm is triggered and the pair flee. Bond's first ever gadget-laden car chase is pretty exciting, even if it does feel a bit wacky racist at times.
And now, here they are, the most daredevil group of daffy drivers to ever whirl their wheels in the wacky races, competing for the title of the world's wackiest racer. The cars are approaching the starting line. First is the Turbo Terrific, driven by Peter Perfect. Next, Rufus Roughcut and Sawtooth in the Buzzwagon. Maneuvering for position is the Army Surplus Special. Right behind is the Ant Hill Mob in their Bulletproof Bomb. And there's ingenious inventor, Pat Pending in his converter car. Oh, and here's the lovely Penelope Pitstop, the glamour gal of the gas pedal. Next, we have the Bouldermobile with the Slag Brothers, Rock and Gravel. Lurching along is the creepy coupe with the gruesome twosome, and right on their tail is the Red Max. And there's the Arkansas Chugabug with Luke and Blubber Bear. Sneaking along last is that mean machine with those double-dealing do-batters, Dick Dastardly and his sidekick, Muttley. And even now, they're up to some dirty trick, and they're off!
I know it's not a popular thing to say that you enjoy overt humour in Bond films, such as old ladies with machine guns, but I love it. Bond and Tilly attempt an escape, but Oddjob kills her with his steel-rimmed top hat. To say that that was the hat that decapitated a stone statue, Tilly Masterson must have a pretty solid neck. You can't see any blood on her. Bond attempts another escape, but is captured. What then follows is another of the series' most iconic moments. Bond is strapped to a table while an industrial laser begins to cut the table in half, prompting the classic Bond moment.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Bond bluffs his way out of this, by letting slip to Goldfinger that MI6 knows all about Operation Grand Slam, prompting Goldfinger to keep him alive.
Who are you?
My name is Pussy Galore.
Bond is transported to Goldfinger's stud farm near Fort Knox in Kentucky by this film's lesbian Bond girl, Pussy Galore.
You can turn off the charm. I'm immune.
Bond escapes his cell and overhears Goldfinger's meeting with US mafiosi who have brought the materials he needs for Operation Grand Slam. At the end of the briefing, one of the mafiosi, Mr. Solo, asks Goldfinger to pay him immediately rather than wait a few days for the larger return from Operation Grand Slam, as Goldfinger has just outlined. Goldfinger accepts and leads him out of the conference room. The rest of the mafia are then killed by poisonous gas, while Solo is killed by Oddjob en route to the airport. So Goldfinger gets all of the mobsters together to explain his plan to them, then kill them, but he kills Mr. Solo separately because Mr. Solo didn't want to get in on the deal that he was never going to make anyway because he was going to kill them all anyway. What's the point of that? Bond is recaptured soon after, but here's the final details of Operation Grand Slam over drinks with Goldfinger. Goldfinger intends to irradiate the US gold supply at Fort Knox with an atomic device which was provided by Mr. Ling. The device will render the US gold supply useless for 58 years, which will greatly increase the value of Goldfinger's own gold. This will also give the Chinese a world advantage resulting from economic chaos in the West. Pussy Galore fits into this plan also, as her flying circus are ordered to spray the poison gas over the US troops that are stationed at Fort Knox. However, of course, she naturally succumbs to James Bond's charms. That's it, Bond, turn that lesbian, kiss the girl until she likes it. Operation Grand Slam begins with Pussy's flying circus, yes, I'm aware of how ridiculous that sounds, spraying the gas over the troops at Fort Knox. With the army neutralised, Goldfinger makes his way into Fort Knox, handcuffing Bond to the atomic device that is set to go off shortly. However, it turns out there was no harmful gas in the canisters at all, as Pussy had changed the canisters before they were sprayed, and called Washington to alert the army. Quite why the army decide to wait until Goldfinger is actually in Fort Knox before doing something about it is questionable, but without that logic we wouldn't have had a great end sequence. Goldfinger prepared for such an event, however, and, disguised in a US Army uniform, locks the vault, trapping Bond, Oddjob, and another henchman, Kish. Goldfinger then kills Mr. Ling with his gold-plated revolver, nice touch, along with some US soldiers, before making his escape in Pussy's helicopter. Kish intends to defuse the bomb, but the fiercely loyal Oddjob throws him off the balcony, killing him. Now that's loyalty money can't buy. Bond manages to unhandcuff himself with the keys from Kish, and is then involved in an electrifying fight with Oddjob. Pun intended there. The American troops get into Fort Knox and defuse the bomb with 007 seconds remaining. Does anyone else smell cheese at this point?
What kept you?
And with the bomb defused, the day is saved and all is well. Or is it? With the gold supply safe, Bond is invited to the White House to meet the President. However, Goldfinger is on board after forcing Pussy to hijack the plane and fly to Cuba. There is a struggle. Goldfinger fires his revolver which hits the window, causing the cabin pressure to decompress. Goldfinger is sucked out of the plane and Bond and Pussy parachute from it just before it explodes. And so the film ends with Bond and Pussy engaging in some fornication under the parachute.
This is no time to be rescued.
Stop! Look! He's gunning for trouble. 007. It spells Bond.
Goldfinger is the ultimate Bond film, no question. It's well and truly the template for all the Bond films to come. Everything in Goldfinger works and works so well. The supporting casts are all terrific, without really any weak link. Honor Blackman as Pussy Galore is amazing. Gert Frober as Goldfinger makes for a brilliant villain, and Harold Sakata as Oddjob is a perfectly menacing side villain. Most importantly, the film doesn't take itself too seriously. It's fun and exciting, it doesn't try to be po-faced. It's like it knows what it is and doesn't try to be anything else.
And I'll admit, a lot of this does seem to be down to the director, Guy Hamilton, but all I can say is he was the best thing that ever happened to the series. And most importantly, it actually feels like a polished film. Terence Young's films always feel a bit rough around the edges, whereas Goldfinger works, it's smooth and polished, it's great. Whilst I admit I do love John Barry's score in this film, and I especially love the title song sung by Shirley Bassey, the trumpets do get a bit grating from time to time. God, I love Goldfinger. Surely after this, the Bond films can only keep getting better, surely!